Welcome back to the Observable Unknown. Today's letter comes from Rachel C. Rachel writes, Dear Dr. Ray, a few times now on your podcast, you've talked about epigenetics and inheritance and something called phylogenetic inertia. I bring this up because I've recently been almost completely separated from my family, and I wonder if maybe some of this has to do with the things I've inherited that I'm not aware of. How am I so different from my family that they want nothing to do with me? It doesn't make sense to me. I've always changed and tried to be the person I thought they wanted me to be. Sometimes I feel like I'm twisting myself into a pretzel, but it never seems to work out in my favor. Please help, and please tell me how I can understand not only why I'm so different, but why they don't want to accept me. Sincerely, Rachel C. Rachel, first I want to say something very, very plainly. Being rejected by your family doesn't automatically mean you failed your family. It may mean you stopped fitting the position they unconsciously assigned to you. Those aren't the same thing. When a person becomes separated from their family, especially after years of trying to be acceptable, the mind usually searches for a personal defect. What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? Why could everyone else remain inside the family while I somehow became the problem? Those are all understandable questions. They're also dangerous questions when asked too soon, because pain often looks for guilt before it looks for structure. And families are structures in the strictest sense. Not just collections of personalities, not just groups of people who share blood, names, memories, holidays, or recipes. Families are emotional systems. They have rules and roles. They have forbidden subjects, and they have approved versions of each person. They have stories about who's strong, who's difficult, who's selfish or unstable, who's loyal or who's ungrateful, who's too sensitive, who always causes trouble, and who must never be questioned. Very few families write these rules down. They don't need to. Children learn them through atmosphere, through tone, silence, punishment, and what gets rewarded, as well as what gets mocked. Children also learn this through what no one is allowed to name. Long before a child understands their own family system, they're already adapting to it. This is where your question becomes extremely important. You're asking whether epigenetics, inheritance, and phylogenetic inertia may help explain why you feel so different from your family. Well, the answer is they may help explain part of it, but not the way people imagine. Epigenetics doesn't mean your ancestors wrote a fixed script into your body that you're doomed to perform. It means the body carries sensitivity to certain conditions: stress, fear, scarcity, conflict, loss, danger, or unpredictability. The body learns from environments. Sometimes, across generations, those lessons may influence how descendants respond to the world, not as destiny, as preparation, as bias, as readiness, as a nervous system already leaning in certain directions before conscious life begins. Phylogenetic inertia gives us another way of thinking about this. In evolution, traits can persist because they once helped an organism survive, even after the original environment has changed. Yesterday's solution remains inside today's body. Sometimes that solution still helps, sometimes it becomes a cage. Families do this too. A family may develop a way of surviving hardship, poverty, violence, addiction, exile, betrayal, grief, or humiliation. A generation adapts, then the adaptation becomes identity. The family no longer says, "This is what we did to survive." Instead, it says, "This is who we are." Then someone comes along and begins to question that survival strategy, not always loudly and not always rebelliously. Sometimes simply by being different, by feeling too much, by refusing the silence, by requiring more honesty, by asking for tenderness, and by wanting accountability. Maybe by no longer agreeing to carry the role that kept the system stable. And the family may experience that difference as danger, not because the person is intrinsically dangerous, but because the system depends on extreme similarity. At Georgetown University, psychiatrist Murray Bowen spent much of his career studying families as emotional systems. One of his central insights was that families tend to protect their own equilibrium even if it's toxic. Unhealthy equilibrium frequently feels safer than change. When one person begins to differentiate, when one person begins to think, feel, choose, or speak outside the inherited pattern, the system will push back, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally. The family doesn't always ask, "Is this person becoming more truthful?" Sometimes, instead, it asks, "Why is this person disrupting the arrangement?" That distinction can break a heart because the person seeking truth may think they're offering honesty. The family may experience it as betrayal. Monica McGoldrick's work with genograms offers another useful lens here. When you look at families across generations, patterns begin to appear. Cutoffs, addictions, reconciliations, disowned members, caretaking roles, explosive conflicts, religious fractures, criminal activity, political fractures, marriages that have been repeated, silences that have been repeated, grief that gets repeated, children recruited into adult emotional burdens. One generation's unfinished business often reappears as another generation's personality problem. This is why I want you to be careful, Rachel, with the sentence, "I've always tried to be the person I thought they wanted me to be." That sentence contains an entire life. You didn't say, "I've always tried to know who I am." You said, "I've always tried to be the person I thought they wanted me to be." That means you learned to treat belonging as performance. You learned to study a room and to ask, who do I need to become so I'm not abandoned? What mood do I need to manage? What truth should I hide? What part of myself needs to shrink or disappear so my family can remain comfortable? That's not love, that's adaptation. And adaptation can be remarkably intelligent without even being remotely healthy. Here's the painful possibility. Your family may not have been asking you to become a whole person. They may have been asking you to continue a specific role. The agreeable one, the rescuer, the quiet one, the promiscuous one, the failure, the peacekeeper, the scapegoat, the drunk, the loyal child, the one who always brings shame, the one who constantly absorbs tension, the one who keeps everyone else from looking too closely at themselves. If you stopped being useful in that role, your difference may have become intolerable to them, not because your difference is wrong, but instead because your role was useful to them and they didn't want to see it broken. This is where my work on the relational topology of consciousness becomes relevant. We don't become ourselves in isolation. We become ourselves inside relational fields, inside families, cultures, stories, inherited pressures, and following hand-me-down maps to our lives, inside timing systems, rituals, expectations, punishments, myths, and unspoken permissions. A person's identity isn't simply born from private choice. It's shaped through participation, through what they're allowed to feel, through what they're punished for knowing, through what the family can tolerate, and through what the family cannot or will not tolerate. So, when someone becomes estranged, the question isn't only, why did my family reject me? The deeper question may be, what version of me could they accept? And what version of me became too truthful for the system to contain? Now I need to be careful. This doesn't mean every family cutoff is noble. This certainly doesn't mean the separated person is always right. This absolutely doesn't mean self-examination becomes unnecessary. Estrangement is a very complex process. Sometimes people hurt each other badly. Sometimes misunderstandings harden into exile. Sometimes pride, grief, mental illness, addiction, ideology, finances, religion, sexuality, boundaries, or old resentment patterns become tangled until no one knows where the original wound began. So I won't tell you to make your family into villains. While that may feel satisfying for a while, it rarely heals anything deeply. But I also won't tell you to make yourself into the villain simply because you weren't accepted. That can become a second wound placed on top of the first. The wiser path is slower. It asks, what pattern was I born into? What role did I learn to perform? What subjects were forbidden? What emotions were unsafe? Who in the family was allowed to need help? Who was expected to provide that help? Who was blamed? Who disappeared? Who stayed loyal by staying silent? And who became unacceptable after telling the truth? These questions matter because they move the mind from self-condemnation into pattern recognition. And pattern recognition, I will tell you, is the beginning of true freedom. You ask why you're so different. Sometimes difference begins as temperament, sometimes as moral refusal, sometimes as injury or sensitivity, sometimes as intelligence or timing. Sometimes one child is born with an nervous system, a conscience, or a perceptual style that cannot metabolize the family's lie. That child isn't necessarily better than the others, but that child may be less able to keep pretending. In some families, the person called difficult is the person who can still feel. In some families, the person called disloyal is the person who stopped protecting the secrets. In some families, the person called unstable is the person whose body finally refused an impossible arrangement. This doesn't make the pain vanish, it gives the pain a better frame. You may be grieving more than separation. You may be grieving the collapse of an imagined future, the family that would one day understand, the apology that would arrive, the embrace that would prove you were always loved underneath all of the confusion, the table where everyone would finally sit honestly. When that future disappears, the grief can feel like a death, because, in a psychological sense, it is. You're not only losing people, you're losing the version of reality in which they eventually became capable of receiving you. So what can you do? Well, you can begin by refusing two extremes. Don't reduce your family to monsters, and don't reduce yourself to a defect. Instead, study the lineage, not obsessively, not to punish them, but to understand the pattern. Draw the emotional map. Who taught whom to fear? Who taught whom to be silent? Who taught whom that love required obedience? Who taught whom that difference meant betrayal? Who first learned that survival depended on control, and who first learned that tenderness was dangerous? Then ask the harder question: what did I inherit that I don't want to pass forward? Because even if you never have children, you still pass things forward through friendships, work, love, speech, art, the rooms you enter, the way you treat your own nervous system, the way you allow or refuse cruelty, and the way you name what others demanded remain unnamed. The work now is not to become acceptable to people who needed you smaller. The work is to become honest without becoming bitter, clear without becoming cruel, separate without becoming hollow, truly free without pretending you were never wounded. Rachel, your family's inability to accept you may tell you something about you, but it may also tell you something about the limits of their system. Some families can love only within the grammar they inherited. When someone speaks a different language of truth, their family might hear disrespect. When someone asks for emotional honesty, their family may hear accusation. When someone asks to be seen clearly, their family might hear rebellion. That's tragic, but it's not proof that you're unworthy of love. You may have spent years trying to become the person they wanted. Perhaps the next task is quite different. Not to become the person they feared, not to become the opposite of them, but to become someone real enough that belonging no longer requires disappearance. What remains unresolved is often inherited. What becomes understood can become something else. And sometimes the first person in a lineage to become free looks to everyone still inside the pattern like the one who broke the family, when in truth, they may be the first one who stopped letting the family break them. If this mailbag helped you see family separation, inherited patterns, or your own story with greater clarity, make that known. Leave a rating or a review, not for recognition, but for signal, so someone who's been blamed for breaking the pattern may finally understand what they were trying to survive. Until next time, remember, you don't become what you feel, you become what you return to, and what you return to returns as you.